The clock on the wall showed 8:30 p.m. as Sarah Martinez carried a heavy tray of dirty dishes to the kitchen. Her feet hurt badly after working for 10 hours straight at the Golden Crown restaurant. This was her second job of the day. She had already worked 6 hours at a coffee shop in the morning before rushing here for the evening shift. Sarah was 23 years old, but she looked older because of all the stress and hard work. Her long black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her white waitress uniform was clean but worn from many washes. She had been working at the Golden Crown for 2 years now, and everyone knew her as the quiet girl who never complained and always did her job well. The Golden Crown was not like other restaurants. It was one of the most expensive places in the city. Rich people came here to eat fancy food and talk about their big business deals. The walls were covered with gold paint, and crystal lights hung from the ceiling. Everything looked expensive and perfect. Sarah felt very different from all the customers who came here wearing designer clothes and expensive jewelry. As Sarah cleaned the tables, she could hear the customers talking about their vacation trips to Europe and their new cars. That cost more than she would make in 5 years. Some talked about buying second homes, while others discussed their children's private schools. Sarah listened but never joined in. She was invisible to most of them, just another worker doing her job. But Sarah had a secret that none of these rich customers knew about. Before her father died 3 years ago, she had been studying music at the local college. She was very good at playing the piano. Her music teacher had told her she was talented enough to study at famous music schools. Sarah had dreamed of becoming a professional pianist and performing on big stages around the world. When her father got sick and died, everything changed. Her mother couldn't work because she was too sad and had her own health problems. Sarah's younger brother Tommy was only 15 then, and he needed someone to take care of him. Sarah had to quit college and find work to pay for food, rent, and all the bills. Her dreams of music had to wait. Now Tommy was 18, but he had gotten very sick with a rare disease that needed expensive treatment. The doctor said he could get better, but the medicine cost thousands of dollars every month. Sarah's mother worked part-time at a small store, but it wasn't enough money. That's why Sarah worked 2 jobs every day, trying to save enough money to keep Tommy alive. Every night when Sarah came home, she was too tired to do anything except sleep. She had an old keyboard in her small bedroom that she used to practice on, but she hardly had time to touch it anymore. Sometimes, very late at night when everyone was sleeping, she would play very quietly for a few minutes. It was the only time she felt like herself again. The Golden Crown had a beautiful grand piano in the corner of the main dining room. It was black and shiny, and it looked very expensive. Most customers didn't even notice it was there. The restaurant owner had bought it to make the place look more fancy, but nobody ever played it. Sarah had asked the manager once if she could play it during her break, but he said no. He was worried she might break it or disturb the customers, but Sarah couldn't help looking at that piano every time she walked past it. She knew exactly what it would feel like to sit at that bench and press those keys. She could imagine the beautiful sounds it would make. Sometimes when she was wiping tables nearby, her fingers would move a little bit like she was playing invisible piano keys. On this Friday evening, Sarah was feeling more tired than usual. Tommy had been in the hospital for 3 days, and the doctor said he needed a new type of medicine that was very expensive. Sarah had been doing math in her head all day, trying to figure out how to pay for it. Even with both her jobs, she was still short of money. The restaurant was very busy that night. All the tables were full of customers eating expensive food and drinking wine that cost more than Sarah made in a week. She moved between the tables, taking orders, bringing food, and cleaning up. Her smile was polite but tired. She had learned to be invisible, to do her job without bothering anyone. At 9 p.m., a man walked into the restaurant. Sarah recognized him immediately. It was Marcus Wellington, one of the richest men in the city. He was famous for starting a technology company. That made him billions of dollars. He was about 40 years old, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. Marcus came to the Golden Crown about once a month. He always sat at the same table in the corner, near the piano. He was polite to the staff, but never talked much. He usually ate alone while working on his laptop or talking on his phone. Sarah had served him many times before, and he always left a good tip, but they never had real conversations. Tonight, Marcus looked different somehow. Instead of immediately opening his laptop, he sat back in his chair and watched the other customers. His eyes moved around the room, observing everything. When Sarah came to take his order, she noticed he was watching her more carefully than usual. "Good evening, Mr. Wellington," Sarah said with her professional smile. "Would you like your usual dinner tonight?" Marcus nodded but didn't look away from her face. "Yes, please." "And Sarah ... double quotes," he said, surprising her by using her name. "You look tired tonight. Everything okay?" Sarah was shocked that he knew her name and that he was asking about her. In all the time she had served him, he had never asked personal questions. "I'm fine, thank you, sir." "Just a long day," she said, not wanting to share her problems with a customer. But Marcus kept watching her as she walked away to place his order. There was something in his eyes that made Sarah feel like he was seeing her differently than other customers did. She wondered why he was paying attention to her tonight. As Sarah continued working, she didn't notice that Marcus was listening carefully every time she passed his table. When she thought no one was looking, she would hum softly to herself. It was a habit she had developed to help her stay calm during stressful days. The songs she hummed were not simple pop songs, but complex classical pieces that she had learned years ago when she was studying music. Tonight, without realizing it, Sarah was humming a beautiful piece by Chopin. It was one of her favorite songs, and she used to play it perfectly on the piano. Marcus recognized the music immediately. His eyes widened with surprise. This was not the kind of music that most people knew, especially not waitresses in restaurants. Marcus put down his phone and listened more carefully. The melody Sarah was humming was complicated and beautiful. Only someone who really understood music could remember it so perfectly. He began to wonder what other secrets this quiet waitress might be hiding. The evening continued normally, but Marcus couldn't stop thinking about what he had heard. When Sarah brought his food, he watched her hands. They moved gracefully, like the hands of someone who had spent many hours practicing piano. When she walked past the grand piano in the corner, he saw her eyes look at it with a special kind of sadness and longing. By the time Marcus finished his dinner, he had made a decision. He had spent his whole life recognizing talent and potential in unexpected places. That's how he had become so successful in business. Now he was seeing something special in this tired waitress, something that the rest of the world was missing. Marcus had an idea that would change everything for Sarah. But first, he needed to test his theory. He needed to find out if his suspicions about her were correct. As he prepared to leave the restaurant, he was already planning something that would either embarrass Sarah or reveal her hidden talents to the world. Sarah had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Marcus Wellington finished his dinner slowly, but his mind was working fast. He kept watching Sarah as she moved between tables, serving other customers. Every time she passed near his table, he listened carefully to the soft humming that came from her lips. The melodies were not simple songs that people heard on the radio. They were complex classical pieces that only trained musicians would know. Sarah had no idea that someone was paying such close attention to her. She was focused on finishing her work so she could go home to her family. Her brother Tommy was getting worse, and the doctors had told her that morning that they needed to start a new treatment immediately. The cost would be $3,000 every month. Sarah had been doing math in her head all evening, trying to figure out how to get that much money. At 10:30 p.m., most of the customers had finished eating and left the restaurant. Only a few tables still had people sitting and talking. Sarah was cleaning the empty tables and getting ready for the restaurant to close. She was looking forward to going home, even though she would have to wake up early for her morning job at the coffee shop. Marcus called Sarah over to his table. She walked toward him, expecting him to ask for his check so he could pay and leave. But instead of asking for the bill, Marcus looked at her with a strange expression on his face. "Sarah," he said, using her name again, "I have an unusual request. For you tonight." Sarah was surprised. In all the time she had served Marcus, he had never made any special requests. He was always polite, but businesslike. Tonight, something was different about him. "Of course, Mr. Wellington. What can I do for you?" Sarah asked, wondering what he might need. Marcus pointed toward the grand piano in the corner of the restaurant. "I want you to play that piano for me." Sarah's heart stopped. She looked at the piano, then back at Marcus, thinking she had heard him wrong. "I'm sorry, sir. Did you say you want me to play the piano?" "Yes," Marcus said calmly. "I want you to sit at that piano and play one song." "Just one song." Sarah felt her face turn red. She looked around the restaurant nervously. There were still about 20 customers sitting at their tables, all rich and important people. The thought of sitting at the piano in front of all these people made her feel sick with fear. "Mr. Wellington, I can't do that. I'm working." "And I don't think the manager would allow it," Sarah said, her voice shaking a little. Marcus smiled. "I already talked to your manager. He said it would be okay if I take responsibility." Sarah looked toward the kitchen and saw her manager watching them. He gave her a small nod, confirming what Marcus had said. She felt trapped and confused. "But sir, I don't understand why you want me to play piano." "I'm just a waitress," Sarah said. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "Sarah, I think you're much more than just a waitress. I've been listening to you hum classical music all evening. Those are not simple songs. They are pieces that only someone with real musical training would know." Sarah felt her heart beating faster. She had been caught. All this time, she thought no one noticed her little habit of humming while she worked. Now this powerful man was asking her to prove something she wasn't sure she could do anymore. "Mr. Wellington, even if I knew how to play piano, I haven't practiced in a long time. I would probably make mistakes and embarrass myself," Sarah said. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He took out 10 $100 bills and placed them on the table. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw the money. $1,000, Marcus said. "If you can play one complete song on that piano without stopping, this money is yours. If you can't do it, or if you don't want to try, you don't owe me anything." Sarah stared at the money. $1,000 was more than she made in a month. At the restaurant, it would pay for Tommy's medicine for the next few weeks. But the thought of playing piano in front of all these people terrified her. What if I make mistakes? What if I forget how to play? Sarah asked. "Then you stop, come back to this table, and we pretend this conversation never happened," Marcus said. "But Sarah, I have a feeling you won't make mistakes." Other customers in the restaurant had noticed the conversation between Marcus and Sarah. Some were looking toward their table, curious about what was happening. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, and it made her even more nervous. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked. "Why do you care if I can play piano or not?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. "Because I believe that everyone deserves a chance to show who they really are. I think you've been hiding your true self for a long time." Sarah looked at the piano again. It was beautiful and perfect, much better than the small keyboard she had at home. She imagined how it would feel to play real piano keys again, to hear the rich sound that only a grand piano could make. But she also thought about all the people watching. These were important customers who paid a lot of money to eat at this fancy restaurant. What would they think if a waitress sat down and tried to play their piano? What if she failed and made a fool of herself? I don't know, Sarah said. It's been so long since I played a real piano. What song would you want me to play? Any song you want, Marcus said. Play something that means something to you. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the music she used to love. She remembered sitting at her old piano teacher's house, learning beautiful pieces by famous composers. She remembered the feeling of her fingers moving across the keys, creating music that could make people cry or smile or dream. Then she thought about Tommy, lying in the hospital bed, needing medicine that she couldn't afford. She thought about her mother working extra hours at the store, trying to help pay the bills. She thought about all the dreams she had given up to take care of her family. If I do this, Sarah said slowly, and if I can play the whole song, you'll really give me that money, no tricks? No tricks, Marcus promised. If you can play one complete song, the money is yours. Sarah looked around the restaurant one more time. More customers had stopped eating to watch what was happening. The waiters and kitchen staff were also looking out from behind the counter. Everyone was waiting to see what she would decide. Sarah thought about her brother Tommy. She thought about the medicine he needed to live. She thought about all the sacrifices her family had made. Maybe it was time to take a risk. Maybe it was time to stop hiding who she really was. Okay, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll try. Marcus smiled and nodded. I knew you would. Sarah untied her apron with shaking hands. She folded it carefully and placed it on Marcus's table. As she walked toward the piano, she could feel everyone in the restaurant watching her. Her legs felt weak and her heart was beating so fast. She thought everyone could hear it. The piano bench was polished and smooth. Sarah sat down slowly and looked at the keys. They were perfect and clean, much nicer than any piano she had ever played. She placed her hands on the keys, but didn't press them yet. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She tried to remember the music that had once been the most important thing in her life. She tried to forget about all the people watching her and focus only on the music. When Sarah opened her eyes, she knew what song she would play. It was a piece that had always been special to her, one that told the story of struggle and hope. She positioned her fingers on the keys and prepared to either fulfill her destiny or face the biggest embarrassment of her life. The entire restaurant held its breath, waiting for the first note. Sarah sat at the piano bench, her hands trembling slightly as they rested on the beautiful black and white keys. The restaurant had become completely quiet. Even the sounds from the kitchen had stopped. Everyone was looking at her, waiting to see what would happen next. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The last time she had played a real piano was 3 years ago, before her father died and her world changed forever. Since then, she had only practiced on her small keyboard at home, and even that was rare because she was always too tired from work. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember how it felt to be a music student. She thought about her old piano teacher, Mrs. Chun, who had always told her that music came from the heart, not just from the fingers. Don't think too much, Mrs. Chun used to say. Let the music flow through you like water. The song Sarah had chosen was Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. It was a piece she had learned when she was 19, and it had always been her favorite. The music was soft and dreamy, like moonlight on water. It told a story of beauty and sadness, hope and longing. It was perfect for how she felt at this moment. Sarah took a deep breath and placed her fingers in position. She pressed the first key very gently. The sound that came from the grand piano was rich and beautiful, much better than anything she had heard in years. The note filled the restaurant like a golden bell, and Sarah felt something wake up inside her that had been sleeping for a long time. Marcus Wellington watched from his table, a small smile on his face. He had been right about Sarah. Even from that first gentle note, he could tell she was not just someone who had taken a few piano lessons. This was a real musician, someone who understood music in her soul. as Sarah began to play the opening melody of Clair de Lune. Something magical happened. Her nervousness started to disappear. Her hands remembered exactly where to go, and her fingers moved across the keys like they had never stopped playing. The music flowed out of the piano like it was coming from her heart. The customers in the restaurant stopped talking completely. Forks stopped moving toward mouths. Wine glasses stayed frozen halfway to lips. Everyone was listening to the most beautiful music they had ever heard in this fancy restaurant. Sarah's whole body began to change as she played. Her back straightened, and her tired expression disappeared. The exhausted waitress who had been serving tables all evening was gone. In her place sat a confident musician who belonged at this beautiful piano. The melody of Clair de Lune danced through the air, telling its story of moonlight and dreams. Sarah's fingers moved with perfect timing, pressing the keys with just the right amount of pressure to make each note sing. She played the soft parts so gently they were like whispers, and the louder parts with passion that made everyone in the room feel the emotions in the music. As she played, Sarah forgot about everything else. She forgot about the people watching her. She forgot about her tired feet and her worries about money. She forgot about Tommy's medical bills and her mother's sadness. For the first time in 3 years, Sarah was completely herself again. Restaurant manager stood behind the counter with his mouth open. He had hired Sarah 2 years ago because she was a hard worker who never caused problems. He had never imagined that she could do something like this. The kitchen staff had all come out to listen, and some of them had tears in their eyes. Marcus watched Sarah's transformation with satisfaction. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen. He had built his business empire by recognizing hidden talent, and he knew real ability when he saw it. Sarah was not just playing the piano well. She was creating something beautiful and moving that touched everyone who heard it. Woman at one of the tables wiped tears from her eyes. She whispered to her husband, "I haven't heard anything this beautiful since we went to that concert in Vienna." Her husband nodded, completely amazed that their waitress could play like a professional concert pianist. Sarah reached the most difficult part of the song, where the melody became more complex and the timing had to be perfect. Her fingers danced across the keys, playing multiple notes at the same time while keeping the main melody clear and beautiful. This was the part where most amateur pianists would make mistakes, but Sarah played it perfectly. As the music continued, people in the restaurant began to realize they were witnessing something very special. This was not just a waitress playing piano. This was an artist sharing her gift with the world. The music told the story of Sarah's life, the beauty she had always carried inside her, the sadness of her sacrifices, and the hope that still lived in her heart. Sarah's eyes were closed as she played, but tears were running down her cheeks. The music was bringing back memories of when she was young and full of dreams. She remembered practicing for hours, planning to audition for music schools, imagining herself performing on stages around the world. The music reminded her of who she used to be and who she still was deep inside. The other customers exchanged looks of amazement. They were used to expensive food and fancy decorations, but they had never experienced anything as precious as this moment. Some took out their phones to record, but then put them away because they realized this was something too special to capture on video. Marcus noticed that even the toughest-looking businessmen in the restaurant were affected by Sarah's playing. One man who was known for being cold and ruthless in his business deals was wiping his eyes with his napkin. Music had a power that money and success could never match. As Sarah approached the end of Clair de Lune, she played the final melody with even more feeling than before. The notes seemed to float in the air like butterflies, gentle and perfect. She had not made a single mistake. Every note had been exactly right. When Sarah played the last note, she kept her hands on the keys for a moment, not wanting the music to end. The sound faded away slowly, leaving the restaurant in complete silence. For several seconds, nobody moved or made any sound. Then suddenly, the silence exploded into applause. Everyone in the restaurant stood up and clapped as loudly as they could. Some people were shouting, "Bravo!" like they were at a concert hall. The applause went on, filling the restaurant with appreciation for what they had just witnessed. Sarah opened her eyes and looked around in shock. She had been so lost in the music that she had forgotten where she was. Now she saw all these important people standing and clapping for her. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Marcus Wellington was clapping too, but he was also smiling, in a way that suggested this evening was far from over. He had more surprises planned for Sarah, and the $1,000 on his table was just the beginning. Sarah stood up from the piano bench, still not quite believing that she had just played a complete song without making any mistakes. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it was from excitement, not fear. The transformation was complete. The invisible waitress had become a celebrated musician in just 4 minutes of beautiful music. But Sarah had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Marcus picked up the $1,000 from his table and walked toward the piano, ready to make Sarah an offer that would change everything. Marcus Wellington walked toward the piano with the $1,000 in his hand, but his smile suggested he had something much bigger planned. The applause in the restaurant was finally starting to quiet down, but people were still talking excitedly about what they had just heard. Sarah stood next to the piano, still breathing hard from the emotional experience of playing music again. She couldn't believe she had just performed in front of all these important people. Her hands were still shaking, but now it was from excitement rather than fear. "That was incredible, Sarah," Marcus said as he reached her. He handed her the $1,000, but he didn't let go of her hand when she took the money. "But I have a confession to make. This evening was not an accident." Sarah looked at him with confusion. "What do you mean?" Marcus gestured for her to sit down at the piano bench again. He pulled up a chair from a nearby table and sat beside her. The restaurant customers were still watching, curious about what would happen next. "Sarah, I've been coming to this restaurant for 6 months, and I've been watching you," Marcus said. "Not in a strange way, but because I noticed something special about you that nobody else seemed to see." Sarah felt nervous again. "I don't understand. What could you have noticed about me? I just serve food and clean tables." Marcus smiled. 3 months ago, I heard you humming a very complicated piece by batch while you were working. Most people don't even know that music exists. 2 months ago, I saw you looking at the piano with such sadness in your eyes that I knew you had a story with music. And last month, I overheard you talking to another waitress about your brother's medical treatments." Sarah's eyes widened. She had always been careful not to talk about her personal problems at work, but sometimes she couldn't help sharing her worries with her coworker Maria. "I did some research," Marcus continued. "I found out that Sarah Martinez was once a music student at the local college. I found out that she had to quit school when her father died. I found out that she's been working 2 jobs to pay for her brother's medical care." Sarah felt her face turn red. She was embarrassed that this powerful man knew so much about her private life. "Why did you research me? That's my personal business." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Because I believe that talent like yours should not be wasted. Because I think you deserve a chance to follow your dreams while still taking care of your family." He handed her the envelope. Sarah took it with trembling hands, wondering what could be inside. "Open it," Marcus said gently. Sarah opened the envelope and pulled out several official-looking papers. The first document made her gasp. It was a letter from the prestigious Manhattan Music Academy, one of the best music schools in the country. "Dear Miss Martinez," Sarah read out loud, her voice shaking. "We are pleased to offer you a full scholarship to complete your music education in our part-time evening program. Sarah stopped reading and looked at Marcus with shock. "How is this possible? I never applied to the school. I sent them a recording of you humming at work, Marcus said. I had my phone hidden and recorded you humming several classical pieces over the past few months. When the school directors heard your voice and learned about your situation, they were very interested in meeting you. Sarah looked at the letter again, hardly believing what she was reading. A full scholarship to one of the best music schools in the country. It would allow her to study music in the evenings while still working during the day. But there's more, Marcus said. Look at the other papers. Sarah found another official document. This one was from Marcus's own company, Wellington Technologies. It was a job offer for a part-time position as a music therapy coordinator for their employee wellness program. The salary was more than she made at both her current jobs combined. Music therapy? Sarah asked. Many companies are learning that. Music helps employees feel less stressed and work better, Marcus explained. You would help design music programs for our workers. It's only 20 hours per week, but it pays well enough to support your family while you study. Sarah couldn't speak. She just stared at the papers, trying to understand that her life was changing completely. In one evening, Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a video. I also recorded your performance tonight. With your permission, I'd like to share this with some friends of mine who work in the music industry. On his phone screen, Sarah could see herself playing the piano, completely lost in the music. Even watching herself, she could see the transformation that had happened. She looked like a completely different person when she was playing. This video could help you get opportunities to perform at events and concerts, Marcus continued. Nothing too big at first, just small performances that would pay well and help you build a reputation. The restaurant manager had been listening to the conversation from nearby. He came over with a big smile on his face. Sarah, he said, I had no idea you were so talented. If you want to play piano here on weekend evenings, I would love to hire you as our pianist. The customers would love it. Sarah looked around at all the customers who were still watching her. Many of them were nodding and smiling, clearly agreeing with the manager's idea. A woman from one of the tables came over. Excuse me, she said to Sarah. I organize charity events for the Children's Hospital. Would you be interested in playing at our fundraiser next month? We pay our performers very well. Another customer, a man in an expensive suit, also approached. I'm planning my daughter's wedding, and we're looking for a pianist. After hearing you play tonight, I can't imagine anyone else doing it. Sarah felt overwhelmed. In just 1 hour, her entire future had changed. She had gone from being a struggling waitress to having multiple opportunities to use her musical talents, but the most amazing thing was still in the envelope. Marcus pointed to the last document. This is the most important one, he said. Sarah pulled out a letter from a famous music producer in New York City. The letter said that based on Marcus's recommendation and the video of her performance, they wanted to meet with Sarah to discuss recording opportunities. Recording? Sarah whispered. Professional musicians make albums, Marcus explained. If you're interested, this producer wants to help you make your first recording. It's a small project, nothing too overwhelming, but it could be the start of a real music career. Sarah looked at all the papers in her hands. A scholarship to music school. A well-paying job that would let her study. Opportunities to perform and even record music. Everything she had dreamed of before her father died was suddenly possible again. Tears started running down her face, but they were happy tears this time. Why? She asked Marcus. Why are you doing all this for me? Marcus stood up and smiled. Because the world needs your music, Sarah. Because talent like yours is too precious to waste serving tables. And because sometimes, when you have the power to change someone's life for the better, you should use that power. Sarah looked around the restaurant at all the people who were smiling at her and clapping again. She thought about her brother, Tommy, who would finally get the medical care he needed without her having to work herself to death. She thought about her mother, who would be so proud to see her daughter following her dreams again. But most of all, she thought about the music that had been sleeping inside her for 3 years, waiting for this moment to wake up and sing again. "What do I need to do?" Sarah asked. Marcus's smile grew even bigger. "First, you call the music school tomorrow. Then, you come to my office on Monday to start your new job. And this weekend, you practice piano, because you have a concert to perform next month." Sarah hugged the envelope to her chest, still not quite believing that this was really happening. The ordinary evening had become the most extraordinary night of her life. The invisible waitress was about to become a celebrated musician, and her journey was just beginning. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez walked into the Golden Crown restaurant, but this time she wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was dressed in a beautiful black evening gown, her hair styled elegantly, and her hands were perfectly manicured for playing piano. Tonight, she was returning as the featured pianist for the restaurant's special anniversary celebration. The same customers who had witnessed her transformation 6 months ago were back to hear her play again. But now they knew they were listening to Sarah Martinez, the rising star of the classical music world. Not just a waitress who could play piano. As Sarah sat at the familiar grand piano, she thought about how much her life had changed since that incredible night when Marcus Wellington had dared her to play. It seemed like a dream, but everything had been real, and every promise Marcus had made had come true. The music school had been amazing. Sarah had thrown herself into her studies with passion she hadn't felt in years. Her professors were impressed with her natural talent and her dedication to learning. She studied music theory, composition, and advanced piano techniques. Even though she was older than most students, she quickly became one of the top performers in her program. The job at Wellington Technologies had been perfect too. Sarah worked 20 hours a week helping employees reduce stress through music programs. She organized small concerts during lunch breaks, taught basic piano lessons to interested workers, and created playlists that help people focus better at work. The employees loved the music programs, and Marcus's company became known as one of the most creative places to work in the city. But the most wonderful change was in Sarah's family situation. Tommy's health had improved dramatically with the new medical treatment. The expensive medicine was working, and doctors said he was getting stronger every month. Sarah's mother had been able to quit her exhausting job at the store and focus on taking care of herself and Tommy. "Ladies and gentlemen," the restaurant manager announced to the room, "please welcome our special guest pianist, Sarah Martinez." The applause was warm and enthusiastic. Sarah smiled and began to play, choosing the same piece she had played that first night, Clair de Lune. But this time, her performance was even more beautiful because she was playing as a free woman, not someone desperate and afraid. As the music filled the restaurant, Sarah remembered all the amazing things that had happened in the past 6 months. The first concert she had performed was at the Children's Hospital charity event. She had been nervous, but the audience loved her playing. That performance led to more invitations to play at weddings, private parties, and small concerts around the city. The recording project with the New York producer had been the most exciting adventure of all. Sarah had spent 3 days in a professional recording studio, creating her first album of classical piano music. The album was called Hidden Dreams, and it told the story of her life through music. When it was released, music critics wrote wonderful reviews, calling Sarah a remarkable new voice in classical music, and an artist who plays with both technical skill and emotional depth. Marcus Wellington was sitting at his usual table, watching Sarah play with pride. He had kept his promise to help her, but Sarah's success was due to her own talent and hard work. Marcus had simply given her the opportunity to show the world what she could do. After the recording was released, something magical happened. The video of Sarah's first performance at the Golden Crown had been shared on social media millions of times. People all over the world were inspired by the story of the waitress who became a pianist. Sarah received messages from people who said her story had encouraged them to pursue their own dreams. Music schools started inviting Sarah to give talks to their students about never giving up on dreams, even when life gets difficult. She spoke about how important it is to remember who you really are, even when you have to work hard jobs to survive. Sarah had also started teaching piano lessons to young people who couldn't afford expensive music schools. She remembered how lucky she had been to have good teachers when she was young, and she wanted to give other kids the same chance. Every Saturday morning, she taught free lessons at a community center in her old neighborhood. The most amazing opportunity came just last month. Sarah had been invited to audition for a famous orchestra in Chicago. If she was selected, she would become their featured pianist and travel around the country performing with them. The audition was in 2 weeks, and Sarah had been practicing for hours every day. As Sarah finished playing Clair de Lune, she looked out at the audience and saw many familiar faces. The woman who had hired her for the charity concert was there with her family. The man whose daughter's wedding she had played at was there with his wife. Even some of her old co-workers from her waitressing days had come to hear her play, but the most important people in the audience were her family. Tommy was sitting at a front table, healthy and smiling. He was now in college, studying to become a doctor because he wanted to help other sick kids the way doctors had helped him. Sarah's mother was there too, looking proud and happy in a way Sarah hadn't seen since before her father died. Marcus stood up and walked to the piano as Sarah finished her performance. The audience applauded loudly, and several people were wiping tears from their eyes. 6 months ago, Marcus said to the room, I asked Sarah to play piano because I believed she had a gift that the world needed to hear. Tonight I want to make another announcement. Sarah looked at him with curiosity, wondering what he was planning now. Marcus pulled out an envelope, similar to the one he had given her 6 months ago. Sarah, this is a letter from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. They want to offer you the position of featured pianist. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth in shock. She hadn't expected to hear about the audition results for another week. They said your audition recording was so impressive that they didn't need to hear anyone else, Marcus continued. Congratulations, Sarah. You're about to become one of the youngest featured pianists in the orchestra's history. The restaurant exploded in applause and cheers. Sarah couldn't stop the tears from flowing down her face. She had gone from serving tables to joining one of the most famous orchestras in the country. As she hugged Marcus, Sarah whispered, Thank you for seeing who I really was when I had forgotten it myself. Marcus smiled. I just gave you a chance. Sarah, everything else was your own talent and determination. Sarah looked out at the audience one more time. 6 months ago, she had been invisible in this room, just another worker doing her job. Tonight, she was celebrated, successful, and most importantly, she was living her true life again. The story of the waitress who became a pianist had become an inspiration to millions of people around the world. But for Sarah, the most important part wasn't the fame or success. It was the fact that she had learned to never give up on her dreams, and that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most beautiful rewards. As Sarah played her final song of the evening, she knew that this was not the end of her story, but just the beginning of a life filled with music, hope, and endless possibilities. The invisible waitress had become a shining star, and her light would continue to inspire others for years to come.